Welcome to the Hockey Writers Prospect Corner, a show with our top prospects writing crew, bringing you the latest news, analysis, scouting reports, mocks, rankings, and much more. From the World Juniors to the NHL draft floor, from the farm to the NHL, our team covers everything that happens in the world of prospects. So sit back, grab a notebook, and get ready for Prospect Corner. Prospect Corner.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Prospect Corner presented by the Hockey Writers. Today, we're going to be taking a look at all four quarterfinal matchups at the 2024 World Junior Championships that just went down today as we're recording here. I'm your host, Logan Horn, and today I'm joined by my co-hosts and fellow prospect analysts, Matthew Zator and Peter Baracchini. How are you doing, Matt?
I'm doing good. Unfortunately, we're going to talk about a team that the country we live in, unfortunately, is not going to be not going to be able to get a medal this year. But yeah, other than that, it's been good. The Canucks prospects are still in it, and they're all doing pretty well. So yeah, pretty good.
Yeah, they barely snuck through, though. We'll get to it, I'm sure. To be fair, before this tournament, none of us thought Canada was world beaters. We didn't think they were really going to compete heavily. And the teams that we thought would compete pretty heavily are still in it, to be honest. The two teams we'll get to. So yeah, maybe not the ideal thing for the nation of Canada, but still a really fun tournament. Lots to talk about and some fun games coming up. Peter, how are you doing today?
Yeah, I'm doing good. I really can't say the same about Matt's Canucks prospects with the Leaf prospects because they got eliminated out. But you know what? It's okay.
Yeah.
Obviously social media is already in a storm in itself, pointing the blame and already, picking on Leaf prospects because why not? Because you need a scapegoat. It's always the Leafs' fault, and apparently so. I'm not going to get too much into it, but if you're, being that type of person, bullying 17, 18, 19-year-old prospects, go out and touch grass, do something or if you don't have snow on the ground, do something productive and, get off the social media because it's now getting really annoying and pathetic.
Yeah, that's fair. I should mention as well, anyone blaming for any of these teams, but especially right now, Canadian people on social media trying to blame or insult these teenagers. They're literally teenagers. I think Matt Savoy just hit 20, so he's not a teenager.
Okay,
but he's still a kid.
Sorry,
just they don't deserve that kind of negativity. They tried their hardest.
Yeah,
they really put it all out there, especially for Canada's game, which we'll get to. For the last 40 minutes, they were excellent. They just didn't have quite enough finish to get it to the finish line. But that's just completely unnecessary. And if you're a grown adult trying to insult teenagers online, you've got other problems. I don't know. We'll move on. Anyway, just before we get started, I want to quickly mention again, the Hockey Writers has expanded our content into the Substack world with a page dedicated to each NHL team, as well as one dedicated to our NHL draft and prospects content. You can sign up to get all of our best prospect articles delivered directly to your inbox multiple times throughout the week. And there's also a premium tier with lots of exclusive articles, mailbags, and more. You can find a sign-up link for that in the video description below. Check it out. All right, so we're going to jump in with the very first quarterfinal game we had today. As someone who is on the West Coast, the Pacific time zone, I will say, did not watch this game. It started at 3 a.m. I love the World Juniors, but I don't love it that much. I woke up every time there was 4 games on a day. I woke up for the 5:30 game. That's as committed as I can be. I can't really handle much more than that. I'm sorry. Not at the holiday season. My sleep schedule is already ruined enough. But really good game. Going back, watching everything I can here. So as you may know, Finland had a really slow start to this tournament, looked really shaky, losing to Canada and Germany in the first few days. But they seem to have figured something out, beating Sweden in a shootout to finish the group stage. Slovakia kind of had the opposite experience. They started off super hot, looking like world beaters, like they were going to be a serious medal contender. And then they got absolutely blown out by Team USA to finish the group stage. So it was a little bit of an iffy pairing here. Who knew what was going to happen? Game was tied with 2 minutes left, and then Aleksanteri Kaskamäki scored to give Finland the lead. But then Slovakia pulled their goalie, and Filip Mesar scored to tie it with 43 seconds left. It was super dramatic. It was a ton of fun. I did actually see this part. I was up early enough. I saw the ending of it, which was the best part of the game.
Yeah.
But once it hit overtime, it ended very quickly. Jiri Lassila scored, sending Finland to the semifinal. Honestly, huge surprise for myself. After their game against Canada, it was like, no, okay, they're all right. And then they lost to Germany, and everyone was like, okay, Finland's done. They're dead. They, who knows, they might miss out on the quarterfinals entirely. But they found something. So, Peter, I'm going to come to you first here. What are your thoughts on Finland's tournament here and the turnaround they found?
Yeah, I mean, even that loss to Germany too, we thought that okay, they're in serious trouble right now. Like
Yeah.
obviously, when Canada plays Finland, it's always going to be a back and forth matchup, but Canada seemed to dominate them a little bit more. And I think that game against Germany really kind of maybe was the turning point for them because they managed to find their footing, they managed to dig deep, they managed to find their game, being aggressive, taking advantage of certain opportunities and in certain moments too. And this game was no different, and a little bit heartbroken because I am part Slovak and I was secretly cheering for them to have that success because this was a really great and talented team. But that rush by Jiri Lassila, I mean, wow, like
Yeah.
that was absolutely insane. That early in overtime to take advantage of it. Um, they needed those big moments in and to rise up in that at that specific time. You really didn't quite get that sense in the first two games, but it seemed like as the tournament progressed, they started to find those moments and take advantage of it, and that's what happened in this one, with the end-to-end rush and then just a nice finish at the end there. Yeah, but the way that they were able to try and to elevate their play every single game, take it bit by bit, not worry too much because they do have the names, Hamanaho, they had Kaskamaki, they have Hellenius, Hemming as some of their younger players coming up as well. A lot of great talent on the back end. And Coco as well in the in net. They really relied on him as the tournament went
Yeah.
on, despite his struggles at the beginning. Yeah, I thought that we always talk about how pesky the Finns can be in like not counting them out. This was one of those instances where they shouldn't have been counted out, but yeah, it seemed like they had the advantage all game. Slovakia got back, but at the same time, it was just that
Mhm.
one moment and they took advantage.
Yeah, absolutely. This was a really strong Slovakian group, better than a lot expected, better than I expected, I'll admit. Adam Gajan was pretty solid for the most part in this tournament, maybe better than that. He was really good for most of this tournament. Someone that we'll talk about later, Servac Petrovsky scored a ton at this tournament. Maxim Sturbak was excellent on the back end. Samuel Hanzek was good, not amazing, but like they looked really strong. This was probably the most evenly matched uh, pairing here. I honestly think Canada, at least coming into the quarterfinals, this is the most evenly matched, most of a toss-up. So I guess we shouldn't be surprised it went either direction. I want to mention before I come to you, Matt, that Lassala's goal in overtime was 24 seconds in overtime, which is ridiculous.
Mm-hmm.
But Matt, what are your thoughts on this quarterfinal match? What do you think of Finland and Slovakia's tournaments? Whatever your thoughts you have there.
Well, one thing about Finland is you never count that team out. They always seem to find a way. I mean, that's why I always say it's like they may not, sometimes their teams don't look that strong, but they end up being in a medal round and being able to go for a medal. That's happened again when we thought, oh, they're done. But they still figure it out. So, I mean, overtime. So, I mean, they could have gone the other way. They could have been eliminated too.
Mhm.
But yeah, they were again that solid Finnish team. They kind of figured themselves out after those two games. And like you said, with the Germany game, I think maybe it was a wake-up call. Like, okay, we got to really figure this out because, I mean, props to Germany. They're always a tough team, it seems too. But Finland's a better team than them, and they should have won that. But they figure it out, get through Slovakia, and Slovakia's had a really good tournament too. Like Servac Petrovsky, he had 5 goals in the tournament. He was really good. Adam Gajan was really good too. I mean, and he was a surprise draft pick in this past draft, and he was really good to start the tournament, even in this game too. So I mean, it could have gone either way. I mean, that's why when it goes into overtime. And but sometimes overtime goes really quick because of that 3-on-3. I mean, it just goes. Sometimes it just ends really fast. So that's what happened here. But yeah, I'd say we'll see what Finland does in the next round. I think they're going to have to be even stronger because they are going to go up against a tougher team. But overall, they just played that team game, and maybe it went away from them for the first couple, but they kind of figured it out in the end.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's fair that Germany game was a bit of a wake-up call. I also think their chances started to go in a little better. I think they were even better than the score showed in that game against Canada. Lenny Haminaho had a lot of chances in that game. Yanni Newman, uh, who I've been a big fan of since his draft, doesn't get a ton of attention. Second rounder back in 2022 by the Kraken. He's a big, I think he's 6'2". He's a big winger, scoring a ton in Liga this year, in the Finnish Liga. Uh, just has been really solid. And the points weren't really coming the first two games, but they sure are now. Also worth mentioning, Consta Helenius has been really solid all tournament, but actually didn't get his first point until this quarterfinal match. He's better than his score sheet will look. It's a short tournament. Sometimes the points don't come. But he's produced a lot of offense. He has created chances, and he's shut down pretty well in the other direction. So the points won't launch him up like draft boards necessarily, but I think he definitely looked as good as you would hope, basically, for a 17-year-old at this tournament. It's not everyone's Macklin Celebrini. Speaking of Macklin Celebrini, expert segue there. We're going to talk now about the second quarter final. And we'll try not to just rant on it for too long because this would be the easiest one to do that. But let's try not to. I don't know. We'll see. That is Canada versus Czechia. Czechia started off really hot. Very strong first period. They had a 2-0 lead after the first period. Something that we kind of learned in this time is that Mathis Rousseau, Canada's goaltender through the entire tournament, maybe the reason NHL teams don't go with sub 6 foot goaltenders is that it's really tough to see through layers of defenders, layers of checkers and screens. And he had a really tough time in this tournament with screens, and that continued in this game. 2-0. They're down 2-0 after the first. Canada really fought back well in the second period, tying it, looking basically as good as they've looked all tournament long. But then in the final period, they still were mostly dominant, but couldn't add any more goals. Looked like it was going to go to overtime. But with 11 seconds left, Czechia scored off of some fluky bounces off of Oliver Bonk. And they scored 11 seconds left. Not nearly enough time for Canada to mount a counterattack, pull their goalie, any of that kind of stuff. So Czechia won. Their first ever victory against Canada in the knockout round at the World Juniors. Congrats to Czechia. I mean, they've been excellent for a few years at the World Juniors. They won silver last year. They took Canada overtime. So, sometimes you don't get the bounce, like Mason McTavish knocking the puck down right on the goal line.
Yeah.
You don't get the puck bouncing back to Connor Bedard in overtime against Slovakia last year. It doesn't always work out.
All of their luck.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. They weren't a dominant team through this tournament, so they by no means were owed a victory here. And they didn't dominate the entire game. If they looked like they did through the final 40 minutes for all 60, they would have won for sure. But they made enough mistakes, and Czechia capitalized big time. So good on them. Wish them all the best in the next round. We'll talk about their next matchup here soon. But Matt, I'll come to you first. What are your thoughts on Canada's tournament? Obviously, missing players in the NHL, as well as Tristan Luneau, Tanner Molendyk being out with injuries right before the tournament starts. Those things really hurt, but they still had just an absolute massive group of talent on that roster. So what do you think went wrong? What are your thoughts on their short tournament this year, just 5 games?
Yeah, I mean, they were behind the 8 ball to start with the injuries, but that's not an excuse. It should never be an excuse, especially when you have other talented guys you can draw upon. You can go all day saying, did they pick the right players? Did they, leave some guys at home maybe should have been, like Riley Heidt, could maybe add more offense. That's all hindsight. That's all stuff that we probably shouldn't be talking about. I mean, that's just how it is. They went with the guys they went with, and it just ended up never happening. But the thing is they still, like you said, they still have had a lot of talent, and some guys just didn't step up. Or just the luck didn't go their way. I mean, that could be happening too. Matt Savoy, I don't know. I count at least 2 or 3 times where he had one where he got in and the puck rolls off his stick when he's just trying to deke, and he probably would have scored if the puck didn't, roll off and go off to the corner. And then another one, I think it was in this game where he had a great chance and he shoots it high and wide. Like, I don't know if it may have ticked off a guy too, but it was pretty high. Like he was shooting it and it wasn't really very close to the net, but it's not on Matt Savoy. I mean, he's probably the most talented forward at this on the team. But some guys like Nate Danielson had a really good tournament, but were we expecting him to be a goal scorer in this one? Probably not. I mean, it was in middle six, maybe. But guys like Jordan Dumais he should probably scored a bit more. I mean, the offense just didn't seem to come from anywhere except for Macklin Celebrini, and you can't really rely on a 17-year-old one guy that say, okay, you're going to have to carry our offense. That's not, what did we say at the beginning of the tournament? What role is he going to have? We were saying like bottom six. And that's not a guy that you're supposed to be like completely relying on. Next year, I don't know if he'll be here. I mean, he could be on the team that drafts him. We'll see. But overall, I just think they just didn't score enough. I mean, maybe defensively had a few mishaps too. Goaltending you could point to. But overall, I just think they just couldn't score. And that was the big deal.
Yeah, obviously the defense and the goaltending could have been better with some more depth or some star power there. But yeah, I agree. They just couldn't score when they needed to. Macklin Celebrini did his best up to this point, according to Elite Prospects, their manual stat tracking throughout this tournament of every player, every second of every game. He, up to this point, was the MVP of the tournament. He was the strongest player in the entire tournament, and he's 17, which is absurd. If he even had some more help on just his line or just the top power play, then he could have been, could have shot up even further. But there was not enough help for him. He was excellent, creating chances every time he was out there, basically. Just excellent through the neutral zone and getting zone entries whenever he had the puck, basically. Super dangerous playmaking shot. He has it all. Didn't get to show it all a ton. He would have got to show it more if Canada scored more goals, and his playmaking would have looked even better. But he was excellent. He was the bright spot for Canada. Denton Matejchuk was really solid, in my opinion. But you're not going to win a medal with one really good player. You can win it with a really good team and then one insane player. That's what they did with Bedard last year. But Celebrini isn't quite on that level, and then the rest of the team isn't quite on the level of last year's. Like there was no Joshua Waugh or Logan Stankoven or Shane Wright. There was nobody to that level really on this team. It just didn't come together on offense at all. Peter, what are your thoughts on Team Canada this year? Their lack of success, lack of goals. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, just really didn't have it. I said before the tournament, we knew that the star power wasn't that great. I mean, they had names aside from Celebrini, who, again, you can't rely on a 17-year-old most of the time, just like Bedard was the previous year, but he had the depth around him. You had guys like Brennan Othman, Shane Wright, Dylan Genther. They still surrounded him, so obviously he took control of every shift, but you had players to fall back on. Didn't get that sense this time around. And like I said in our preview show, that this is kind of going to be like a blue collar, hard working team, like some of those like 06, 07 teams where you didn't have big names, but working by committee. They didn't even do that. And aside from the first two games, it really wasn't that great. You started to notice in that Sweden game how everything started to dip off with the undisciplined play, the turnovers, the just not being like the attention to detail wasn't quite there. And we can talk about, passes not connecting, trying to do too much, not sticking to the game plan, having that Canadian forecheck. You really didn't quite see it at times. Didn't get quality goaltending. As good as Mathis Rousseau has been, like we talked about, the sub 600 size, it really got the best of him. And maybe they overworked him. I think maybe you could have rested him against that Germany game. to get ready for the next round. And then what happened in the Germany game where he had trouble seeing those blocked shots or like those high traffic areas with players in front, he had trouble spotting the puck. It happened again today with the second goal. First goal he should have had. I'm not pinning this game on him, but those two goals really can't happen. And yeah, even in that third period, Canada, they got their shots, but they weren't like dangerous quality shots. Like we said, it was either wide, over the top of the net. They weren't hitting their mark. And if you got to do that, especially a big goalie like Hrabal, who has been prone to, be kind of streaky in net at times too, where he's had good games, but also bad games where he's not on point. You got to crash that crease. You got to pepper him with more shots like in the high danger area. Get him moving because his movement may not be as quick as other goalies his height or, that's in that, 6'2", 6'3", 6'4" range. And it just didn't, they had the momentum. They had the offensive zone time. They did everything right but score. And that to me was the difference maker. Like we said, there is no high octane player that can be relied on to score a goal aside from Macklin Celebrini. I mean, Savoy was quiet. Geeky kind of, went quiet down the stretch, and although he got ejected from that Germany game, but no, I mean, we're not going to touch on that. But even names like, like Carson Rakoff was a good depth addition. I think he should have been played a little bit more, giving him more opportunity. Because they were going back and forth between him and Wood. I thought him and Celebrini's line had good chemistry. I lost my train of thought here for a quick second. Yeah, I was thinking about something else before I got into Rakoff, but yeah, again, the talent wasn't there, and they needed more dangerous players. Like we talked about Bradley Nadeau, Riley Heidt. Those are guys that probably, could have had an impact. The guys that could be game changing really weren't there. They were relying on Fraser Minton. As much as I like him, he's not really a top line scorer. He's more of a depth guy. Easton Cowan, I thought he struggled at moments, but he had great moments himself as well. Owen Beck, all these other players throughout the lineup. Matthew Poitras too, I was a little bit disappointed with his play, being the most senior, quote unquote, of the junior team with the NHL time that he spent with Boston. I thought he was really quiet until, that second period most of the time. But yeah, just some names that really needed to step up that really weren't there. But the bounces went their way for Czechia. You got to give credit to them because they took advantage of that, but they even answered the bell when Canada was putting on the pressure. So, yeah, just a disappointing tournament overall for Canada, but also like kind of the luck ran out for them.
Yeah, for sure. And I mean, Czechia played a great game. They bended, but they did not break under the pressure from Canada for 40 minutes. I'm glad you mentioned Peter, Michael Hrabal. He was great in this game. He is massive. And I agree, like, you kind of just need to chuck the puck at him because, I mean, he's big, but like his technique isn't perfect yet. He's young. Like pucks get through him more than you'd expect for someone his size. But they kept trying to punch it over his shoulder, which is like this much space because he's massive. So it's like, I don't know why you think that's the best spot when he has trouble flapping his wings. So like, I don't know, try shooting it through him. But anyway, there was a lot of, a last second pass from someone who's like a goal per game in junior, who's like, you'll have a better chance. You give it a try. And there's a lot of that. It did not go great for Canada. Anywho, that's enough on that. Czechia is heading to the next round. I think they're against Sweden in the semis, which we'll get to after a little bit here. Could be an interesting matchup because Czechia has given some trouble to a few teams during this tournament already. It was Czechia, right, that took the USA to a shootout, I believe.
They did, yes.
Yeah.
So they can compete with anyone. If they can take the USA to a shootout, they can probably take anyone. Granted, I believe Jacob Fowler was in net for the USA, and Troy Augustine is clearly their number one at this point, has just dealt with a flu bug throughout this tournament a little bit. So he's been rested here and there, and we'll see what that looks like when the games get really important here. But next up, third, we're going to talk about USA versus Latvia. Quick here. Yeah, this game went about as expected. Probably won't be a ton to talk about here. Americans rolled over Latvia 7-2. To be fair, at one point it was 2-1 for USA. So Latvia was in it. They were competing hard. they were what they've been for the last few years of this tournament, which is really impressive. They're not a team that you're scared of necessarily, but they're a team that you shouldn't take lightly anymore.
No.
You look at their goals for, goals against for the tournament, and you might be like, "Are you sure?" But the fact that they made the quarterfinals is a positive over recent years. And they competed really hard, especially through maybe the first 20, 30 minutes of each game. Once the games kind of got out of hand, it is a little looser, a little more undisciplined and stuff. But really solid effort for Latvia throughout this tournament. Yeah, I should also mention Gabe Perreault, Will Smith, Ryan Leonard, that Boston College line in college hockey. They were great in this game. They combined for 4 of the goals that the USA scored, 4 of 7. And USA is the highest seed in the group stage of this tournament, so they get the most favorable matchup in the semifinals, which is Finland. Maybe that's not the most favorable though, given how the incline that Finland is on. But Matt, I'll come to you first here. What are your thoughts on Latvia's tournament?
Yeah, well, I mean, like you said, Latvia shouldn't be taken lightly. They work hard. They're probably one of the hardest working teams. I mean, Switzerland is up there too. They always seem to put together really good tournaments and surprise. Danzlak Melis, I think he's been good in the last couple World Juniors.
He's been
And
key.
he's always seems to be the guy that you always talk about after their tournament. And he was again one of their best players. So and even Eric Smatejko, I'm probably saying his name wrong, but he looked like he could be a second round pick maybe in this draft. So yeah, Latvia is not a pushover team, even though they do get blown out but it's just they just don't have as much talent as US. I mean, that's just how it is. I mean, as much as you work hard, if you don't have the talent to deal with them, unfortunately, you get blown out. It just happens. Um, because the US can roll line after line at you, and if you don't have the defense or the goaltending to deal with it, you're gonna get scored on. But overall, they had a good tournament. Made it to the quarterfinals, and you never take them lightly. And yes, they're not in the medal contention, but like we saw in the World Championship there, they got a bronze medal, and that was on the back of a goaltender. So it could happen. It didn't happen this time, but that's why you just don't take them lightly.
Yeah, absolutely. It should also be mentioned that Latvia's, as a nation, is less than 1% of the size of the USA when it comes to population.
Yeah.
So the fact that they were even this competitive is remarkable. And it's a real sign of growth in their program, both senior level, like you mentioned, Matt, and at this junior level. The fact that they're keeping with these teams now in a much bigger way than they did, even just like 5 years ago, 10 years ago, whenever they made it to the top level, they would just get kicked right back down. Obviously, Russia being ineligible helps over the last few years, and the lack of relegation for a couple of years in COVID there. But they're growing. This is really impressive. So maybe not the ultimate outcome they dream of, but really solid for Latvia in my eyes as well. Peter, what are your thoughts on Latvia's tournament here? Any standouts? Any thoughts?
Yeah, obviously, Matt mentioned Lakmelis and Matejko. I think Matejko is definitely making a name for himself to be not necessarily maybe a second. He's pushing for that, but he could easily be a third or fourth rounder in this draft easily. I mean, the way that he dominated the QMJHL before he went over to the juniors, 30 points in 28 games, respectful. But also he has a size too. And a lot of the Latvians like to use that physicality to their advantage. And I think that's why they're being very successful at this level. The world championships, they're being physical. They're using the size to their advantage to win those puck battles, to be gritty, to be in your face. And just goes to show that maybe that kind of style does work. If you have like a couple more high end, skillful players, that could definitely push you over the top as well. But they're playing gritty. They're grinding games out. And that's the main thing that you want to see. You want to see competition. You want to see teams not falter. And they're doing just that. Yeah, they're going up against the US. I mean, US has been mowing over the competition this whole entire tournament. Yeah, like you said, the outcome was expected, but they kept in there. They were very competitive, just like Norway. They stayed in there for the longest time and was very competitive. You're starting to see a little bit more parity right now, and that's a good sign for the game when you see teams like Latvia and Norway, you know, again, the games got away from them, but they managed to hold their own for a good, 20, 30, 40 minutes, and that's impressive. I say they just got to stay with the course. This is even last year, I believe they made the medal round. So the fact that they made it this time around, they're a little bit safe. But they got to keep going because there's still a lot of names and a lot of competition or a lot of names coming up in their system that need to be replaced with players outgoing. So they need to fill that in order to stay in the top group. But if they keep to their game plan and stick with it, they definitely can stay up here.
Yeah, absolutely. Really positive tournament for Latvia. I agree, Matt. I like Eric Smateko a lot. Point per game in the queue, 6'4" winger. Wasn't dominant at this tournament, but can't expect much from someone on this team that just kind of gets blown out a lot of games. But I liked what I saw from him here. Positive. He's definitely in my second round probably right now. I don't know if he's very high in it, but I think he's on the radar there for sure. Definitely put himself on the map. I also want to mention Nick Fanenko plays in the queue as well. In this game, I believe he played just over 30 minutes and was a -1 in a game where his team lost by 5 goals. So that is massive. He had an excellent tournament, as good as you could hope for just a sturdy defensive defenseman. Chipped in a little bit on offense, but that's not what you expect from him, really, even in the QMJHL. But solid showing from him, especially in that game. That's really impressive stat line. It was a more fun game than you might expect, 7-2, but not the most exciting of this tournament, which is the final one, which we'll get to in just a minute after we just take this break quickly. So I just want to mention once again, like I did at the top of the show, the Hockey Writers has expanded to the Substack world with a page dedicated to each NHL team, as well as one for our NHL draft and prospects content. You can sign up to get all of our best prospect articles delivered right to your inbox multiple times throughout the week. And there's also a premium tier with exclusive articles, mailbags, and more. You can find a sign up link in the video description below. Check it out. All right, we're going to jump in now to the final quarterfinal match of the day. And in my opinion, it was the most exciting one. It was our second overtime game. Sweden dominated the first period. They had a 2-0 lead against Switzerland. Felt like this might be a bit of a blowout, especially since the first goal was like 90 seconds in or something. But the game kind of slipped away from them a little bit, and the Swiss really started pushing towards the end of the game and actually tied it in the third. The game went to overtime. There was just an obnoxious spearing call at the end of regulation that got changed to a slash, but really it was just like a poke, which like you shouldn't do, but also isn't a penalty. So thankfully the game didn't end as a result of that power play. That would have been too much drama and it just would have been really annoying. Because hopefully because it ended the way it did, we can just forget about that penalty after today. But if the game ended on it, we'd have to talk about it all tournament long, and I'm done with it already. Anyway, game went to overtime, another power play. This one deserved. Some people are arguing it. I don't get that. It was definitely a penalty. But Axel Sandin Pellikka called game, scored on a wrist shot for Sweden, and Sweden's off to the semifinals. The hosts put a little bit of the Swiss put a little bit of fear into them, dragging them to overtime, and even some chances in overtime by Switzerland. But Sweden ultimately won out in the end. Peter, what are your thoughts on this game and on Switzerland's tournament in general?
Yeah, if that, phantom poke slash was a penalty, I like it was the major talking point. Obviously, that one in overtime, that was a penalty. It did get in the hands, that's a penalty. I would be mad if the phantom one was the one that decided the game, because then you have a lot of issues on your hands with the officiating, double IHF, because that's a problem right there. But yeah, I thought Switzerland did a good job to battle their way back, kind of like the way Canada did. But you know what? There was a little bit more incentive for them because this was basically them saying that kind of like Latvia, this is something that they can still keep up and pressure the top teams in this tournament. And not only that, Sweden did kind of fall back. They kind of took that situation a little bit too much for granted, I thought. In that third period, especially, Switzerland were getting the more dangerous chances, and they were lucky to get or push it to overtime because if Sweden was consistent, that it was just over right then and there. Um, yeah, I thought the Swiss were really, really well composed. They tried to stay in there as best as possible. Again, with a team like that, that's like the underdog upset in the works. Maybe you could try and push that, but it just didn't quite work out. And Switzerland were very. I'm going to say this too. They're very in your face. They're very intense in terms of like puck pressure and forcing turnovers and all that. I thought Rodwin Dionisio, I hope I said that right. The last name. Um, he looked really good on the back end, and I believe there's a 17-year-old that they were, playing quite a bit. I think it was I'm trying to find the
Leon
roster
Mugli.
list. Mugli. They were relying on him quite a bit. There we go. Leon Mugli, Nick Maley. They had a lot of good names on the back end that really stood out as well. But Mugli himself, I thought he was very, kind of like what we saw with Axine Sandin Pelika last year, sort of like one of the younger players on the team, rising to the occasion and playing big minutes. He did just that with Switzerland. Definitely probably going to improve his draft stock as a result. I believe he is up for this year's draft. Smart and mobile. I really think that he's got a lot of potential in his future. Again, everyone's going to say, well, 1 assist in 4 games, but whatever. He definitely showed impact, and he definitely, proved his worth that there is potential there for him. So yeah, a lot of good names, especially on the back end for Switzerland. I really liked their defensive core. They really came together. They really tried to eliminate as many high chances as possible. And yeah, probably in tight, but this is probably one effort that they would like. And even though that they lost, they're still going to take that with them into heading into the tournament next year.
Yeah, absolutely. Taking the tournament favorite, the hosts, to overtime in the quarterfinals is not as a bad loss. That is not a bad loss. That is, it's still tough and it's heartbreaking to get that close, but that's still a tournament you can be really proud of. Switzerland's team there doesn't, again, one of these teams that doesn't have the high end NHL talent, but they've got enough U20 talent and they've got the commitment, they've got the camaraderie, and they just fight hard for each other. And that Swiss team was up and down throughout the tournament a little bit, but they looked really strong. I agree. Rodwin Dionisio, which is just a lovely name. I believe he's an Anaheim Ducks prospect.
He is. Yeah.
Yeah. Looked really great. Honestly, there were times where he looked like a winger. I think that's just because there wasn't a ton of high-end offensive talent there, but he led so many offensive rushes and like 2-on-1s and stuff. It was mind-blowing. Like Denton Matejchuk did that more than you expect a defenseman to, but Dionisio did it constantly. Like every time he had the puck, he's like, I'm taking it to the net and I'm creating a scoring chance. And it happened a lot of the time. So he was really impressive. Not necessarily someone who I expect to be an overwhelmingly talented NHLer one day, but at this level, he stood out for sure. So he's someone to keep an eye on at very least. Matt, what were your thoughts on this game, on Switzerland's tournament, all of the above?
Yeah, what I was impressed is their goaltender, Alessio Baglieri. He was actually really good throughout this tournament and kept them in games where they probably shouldn't have been in it. And but that's Switzerland just had. I mean, that's what they do. I mean, they're good. They're a good team again, just like Finland. Very good team game. The goaltender can sometimes win them a game. That's happened in multiple tournaments throughout their history. You just can't take them lightly. They just play a really solid system. They say about defensively, they seem to be able to do that. I don't really think Switzerland gets blown out a lot. I mean, when you look at their tournaments, they're always close games. Like Canada always has problems with them. It seems. I mean, I always go back to a game in the Olympics where Martin Gerber just shut Canada down and I think shut him out, and it's like a 50 save shutout or something. But they just can do that. I mean, that's why you never take them lightly. And I mean, Sweden kind of did in the third period. And that's why it became a tie game, is why it was in overtime. So yeah, really strong tournament for them. And you can never really count them out from even doing stuff. And so that's why they're always in the World Juniors.
Yeah, absolutely. You could tell that the Swedish players were scared. Once the game was tied, from then until the end of it, even every moment they're on the power play, you could see the nerves playing in front of their fans. They're playing at home and they're playing for the tournament. They could have just been kicked out right then and there. So good for them sticking it out. Really fun team to watch throughout this tournament. Uh, just really solid, honestly. Just their defense is great. Goaltending has been great. Forward group has been as advertised. Lekaramäki and Ostland especially have been great for them. And if they want to win gold, those two are going to have to keep it up, which I think they can. I think they both have 7 points now through 5 games, which is pretty solid. Yeah, Axel Sandin Pellikka, great shot, great goal tonight as well. Matthias Havelid has been shooting a ton. Maybe shouldn't play quite as much at 5-on-5, in my opinion, but he's been pretty solid. So I can't be too upset. All right. That is the last quarterfinal matchup. And so now we're just going to quickly chat about upcoming hockey. First is actually a different tournament I just want to mention. The women's U18 World Juniors World Championship starts later this week, I think in 3 or 4 days from when we're recording this. And 2 prospects to watch for sure is for Canada, Chloe Primarina. She's actually a Vancouver Giants draft pick in the WHL Bantam draft a year or 2 ago. I think she just turned 17 in the U20 women's league she's playing in right now. She's a defenseman, by the way. She leads it in points by like 20 plus points, which is absurd. She's younger than everyone and she's way better than everyone. So watch out for her with Team Canada. And then with Slovakia, a name you might recognize from last year, Nela Lopusanova. Last year, she's 15 now. Last year at 14 at this U18 tournament, she scored 12 points in 5 games and scored a Michigan goal. Just absolutely absurdly talented. She's playing at a prep school in the US this year. So she'll be someone to follow, especially with the PWHL kicking off this weekend or this week. The Professional Women's Hockey League. Nella Lopusanova is probably going to be a name to watch there in 5-6 years, however long it takes. She's so young, but incredibly talented. So those are some players to watch for sure at that tournament. You will absolutely see highlights from both of them all over Twitter very soon. Anywho, we'll get back to upcoming games that are at the World Juniors now. So there are 3 games coming up on this Thursday. One that is so absurdly early in the morning that I couldn't dream of waking up early enough to watch it. And that is the relegation game. You heard me right, not relegation series. It is a single game elimination this year, which is brutal.
Yeah.
Norway versus Germany are playing, I believe, at 2 a.m. my time, which is great. Love that. Thank you so much, IIHF. I don't know what that is in Gothenburg, but I'm assuming it's pretty early for them too.
Yeah.
Anywho, Peter, what are your thoughts on that game? What are your expectations for Norway versus Germany, the relegation here?
Yeah, I honestly completely forgot that it's just one single elimination
One and
game as
done.
opposed to like a 3-game series kind of thing. But yeah, this is basically win or go home or get demoted back because it's going to be difficult because Norway was so good in the division below that they got their way up or earned their way back up with names like, Brensik Nygaard leading the way, Petteri Vesterheim, who's looking to be a draft, entering the draft again this time. They got some really solid names and, underrated names that, were key factors for them getting to this point. So they're going to do everything they can to try and stay in. And, with Germany, again, same situation now. Obviously, a lot of their better players are in the next level or, aren't making it right now. Obviously, Julian Lewis is the top name for Germany right now or the top rated prospect on their team. So I actually thought that he's been having a good tournament himself. I think he's going to be leading the way for Germany still in this key and crucial moment. Um, but yeah, it's very difficult because it's sad to see one of these teams go because you've seen how well Germany is playing in this tournament when they have the players or like the top tier talent when they're available to them. Obviously, not getting it right now because everyone age ranges and everyone's growing up. They're,
Hmm.
making more of an impact in the NHL. And even, with Norway, you're starting to see that right now with a player like Brandstad Nygaard. Um, a potential top 10 pick in this year's draft. Hopefully that this tournament is basically a coming out party for him to show that, he is definitely worth the hype. That he's got a lot of pro skills
Mm-hmm.
already. So that's going to be big for Norway if they could stay in here. And maybe if he gets back and if they stay in the tournament and Norway is back next year, Brandstad Nygaard is definitely going to have kind of like not necessarily an encore performance, but more of that experience to play with one tournament under his belt as well. So a lot of writing on for both teams. They want to
Mm-hmm.
stay in here. They want to stick. It's just a matter of what the final outcome is going to be. They're going to be, putting everything that they got into this game. So it's definitely going to be entertaining.
Yeah, absolutely. It's kind of sad to see either of these teams go. They were both really fun in this tournament, and they gave some teams some scares.
Mhm.
Germany beating Finland, really pushing Canada more than you would hope as a Canadian fan. Norway giving US the USA a scare as their season opener there, where you could tell Norway was like, we could actually win, and the USA was
Mhm.
like, we thought this was going to be easy. And it was not easy. It wasn't an easy win. They didn't roll over and die at any point in the tournament. Great teams. I expect this to be a really good one. Matt, what are your thoughts on this relegation here? What do you think is going to happen here? I have no clue.
It's tough when one of them's going to be gone next year, and uh, I mean they can fight to get back. I mean they have that
Mhm.
tournament just before the World Juniors to get who's going to get promoted into it, so they could return. But Norway, it was fun that they got into this tournament. It could be a one and just this time, and then they're done for next year. But it's tough to see one of them go. And they both, like you said, both had great tournaments and put, some strong teams on notice that, it's not going to be easy and any game can potentially be an upset. And I mean, the
Hmm.
talent levels obviously aren't the same as some of these other nations, but again, one game, it can happen. And, I mean, bounces go your way, and and sometimes other teams beat teams that they shouldn't. And Germany did that against Finland. They've done that in the past. Again, there's another team that you always have to worry about whenever you play them because they have a really solid system, and they sometimes have some star players like Draisaitl, Stützle, in the past, but, Peterka. They've actually had some really good players on these last, just this season, not as much. But yeah, we'll see what happens. It's probably going to be a tight game because both teams play a tighter system and they're both around. Maybe Norway's a little less with talent level, but I think it's going to end up being an overtime game, close game.
That'd be fun. I mean, I
Yeah.
think it's going to be a good competition for sure. Whoever gets relegated though will be replaced next year by Kazakhstan of
All
all
right. Yes, they already
countries.
did that tournament.
They won
Yeah.
that tournament already ran, and they won the Division 1A tournament for the World Juniors. So get ready to see some teal and yellow jerseys next year. I can't wait. Let's
Beautiful.
let's get some more teal and yellow jerseys out there in the world. All right, quickly before we wrap up here, let's just quickly mention the two semifinal matchups. So we have Finland versus USA and Czechia versus Sweden. Matt, I'll come to you first on this one. What are your thoughts on these matchups? Can you give me a player to watch in each game here?
Well, yeah, Finland, USA, that's going to be an interesting one. I think, well, obviously the US is a lot more talented. They got a ton of, I mean, they've just done it throughout this tournament.
Hmm.
And I'm just going to mention the guy that's leading the scoring right now, and that is Cutter Goche. I got a ton of assists. I mean, he's got what, 9 assists? That's why he leads the tournament in scoring. And that's all because of his line that he's on and the guys that are scoring goals. So yeah, Cutter Gauthier is probably going to lead the way again. He's got 10 points already. And for the other game, Czechia Sweden, Jonathan Lekaramäki. I mean, he's been really good. Especially maybe not dominating, like I said. Oh, he's going to dominate. He's got 4 goals. I mean, pretty good. And all the goals have all been snipes, I believe. At least 3 of them have been just.
Yeah.
His shot is just back. I mean, I don't know if it ever left him. It just kind of the injuries have gotten in the way a bit. But yeah, Lekaramäki is just gonna keep an eye on him because he's been really good, especially on the power play, which I think he's going to score a ton of goals on the power play in the NHL when he gets there. So have the other side. I don't know what shot. Well, Pettersson and him, and he'll be on the same power play unit, I'm assuming. So
Yeah, fair. Also, good news for Canucks fans. It was like unofficially announced that I believe both Elias Pettersson 2.0,
yes.
The defenseman, and Jonathan Karamaki are crossing over to the AHL next year, with Tom Belander taking more time in the NCAA. It doesn't seem like they're in a rush to get him to Abbotsford, but that's some cool news. Could be fun to watch the Karamaki out in Abbey next year. I'm sure you'll enjoy that, Matt.
Oh yes.
What are your thoughts on the other matchup there too? Czechia, Sweden. Oh no, you already said that. You said Lekaramäki.
Yeah. I'll say Lekaramäki to watch, but for the game itself.
Sure, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, Sweden's got to be careful though. Czechia, like what they did to Canada, they're not a pushover. They can beat you. And Sweden, yes, they got more scoring. And I mean, maybe not talent, but Canada's got a lot of talent, but Sweden's got more, and they're scoring. So yeah, they're still got to be careful because Czechia can upset them. I think it's gonna be a close game too. I think that could be an overtime game as well. I'm hoping not because I want Sweden to win, but yeah, it's gonna be a tight game though.
Yeah, absolutely. Peter, what are your thoughts on these semifinal matchups? Could you give me a player to watch in each of them?
Yeah, I think for both teams, for USA and Sweden, obviously they're the favorites, but these, like Matt said, these are 2 teams that have been known to be a thorn in, the side as an underdog. So you better watch out because it's possible that we could still see an upset as a result. It's not the first time that this has happened in the semis or even in quarterfinals that we've seen in the past too. But for USA and Finland, I'm going to say Rucker McGroarty for Team USA as a player to watch in that game. Obviously, all the eyes are on Cutter Gauthier, and one other player that's second in scoring. I'm not going to say him because he's just going to put a little footnote there for when we get to our prospects of the week. But I don't know. It seems like Rucker thrives as that power forward, physical, goal scoring type of player. And when you play against the Finns, obviously you got to expect some physicality as well. And I think he's going to be a major factor in that game. That's one thing that he's going to probably thrive on and going to stand out in the way because he can't throw the body, he can't score, he can't be a dominant factor down low. He's basically one that I'm keeping an eye on in that game. And again, he's been productive. I mean, 7 points in 5 games is nothing to sneer at or laugh at, basically. But I feel like he could get a little bit more production in this game, and basically just how dominant the USA has been. As for Sweden and Czechia, that's a tough one, really. I'm gonna say watch out on Czechia. Basically, the one who's basically the dagger in Canada's heart today, Jakob Stansel. He rose in a big moment today. Obviously, when you have the likes of Yuri Kulik, Shala, Dominic Ryman has had a great tournament. Matthias Shapovalov as well. Stansel really, rose to the occasion in that game against Canada, scoring the opening goal and the game winner that bounced off Bonk's foot. So
that
who knows?
Off of Bonk.
Yeah, double bonk off bonk. But yeah, I think he's one player that could have a big impact as sort of that secondary guy that could fly under the radar. Obviously 7th in team scoring right now, but you know what? He hasn't been, he has been noticeable throughout the whole entire tournament and as it progressed. So I'm thinking he's going to have another big game, or is going to play a very underrated factor for Czechia in that Sweden game as well.
Yeah, I agree with all that. I think it's fair to say for these matchups that USA and Sweden are the favorites because, as we mentioned in our last show, they were the favorites coming into the tournament. And they haven't really done much to make us change our minds on that.
Mm-hmm.
But certainly Finland and Czechia are capable of some upsets here. One or two of those could flip, and I wouldn't be all that surprised. Finland USA, I think it's worth watching Yanni Newman. I think he's been just heating up more and more throughout the tournament. He's been a really big factor the last few games. USA, though, the goaltending situation has been a little odd with Augustine being sick and then not playing in the quarterfinals. Potentially they're resting him because he's sick, or they're resting him for back-to-backs because the semifinals and the finals are on back-to-back days. So potentially they're just giving him some time to prepare for that. But he has been excellent in the two games I think that he's played. It's easy to look at the scores in those games and think, oh, the goalie didn't have to do all that much, but he made it a close, or he was the reason it wasn't a close game in some of those instances. Looks really strong. So he's someone to be scared of if you're Finland, or if you're Czechia or Sweden and you're worried about going to the gold medal game there against him. Czechia, Sweden, again, going to be a great game. Czechia beat Canada, almost beat the US. If that game ended in overtime, continuous overtime instead of a shootout, who knows what would have happened? Coin flip. Czechia could have taken that game as well. So they're no joke here, and Jiri Kulich is phenomenal. He became Czechia's all-time leading goal scorer and point scorer at the World Juniors, which is phenomenal. Should be in the NHL, by the way. But one last person for Sweden, Liam Ogren, the captain, he's been all over it. He doesn't have a single goal to show for his efforts in 5 games. He's had so many chances. He creates so much everywhere on the ice, but he creates so much offense. I have to think it's going to happen. He's got at least 2 games. Well, no, he's got 2 games left. So make it count, and it's not going to count more than in these games. So watch out for him. I think he's going to do some damage here.
Should we do our predictions now? Because
Sure, why
next
not?
episode will be after it, right?
Sure, we'll be doing it after. Why not? So, Finland, USA. Matt, who do you got?
I'm gonna go USA. I think they're just too strong of a team.
Yeah.
And
Peter, who do you got? Oh yeah.
Yeah, I'm Czechia, Sweden. I say Sweden. So it'll be a Sweden US.
Sweden, USA gold. And then who do you have winning gold?
Oh my gosh, that's gonna be a really good game if that happens to be. Oh my, I'm fortunate to say the US. I think their goaltending, even though Havelet has been insane as well, I think it's gonna come down to, it's gonna be an overtime, but US is gonna win it. Even though I want Sweden to win it.
and then bronze, who do you have? Czechia, Finland.
I'm gonna see, that's another. I'm gonna say Finland. They always seem to pull it out in games like that when they get down to it. So Finland bronze on that one.
Nice. And they're just getting better, so who knows? Peter, what about you? Finland versus USA, who do you have?
Yeah, definitely USA. I don't think there's any question about that one.
Yeah, fair. Czechia, Sweden, who do you have?
See, that's why I feel there's going to be an upset.
Oh yeah, go for it.
You know what? I'm going to go crazy. I'm going to say Czechia. I think they're going to be riding high off that win against Canada, and I think they're going to be even more determined to try and overthrow dethrone, not necessarily dethrone, but knock off the hometown team. So, as much as I want USA Sweden, I feel like there's going to be a upset, but then again, I'm going to look back on this and be like, man, what an idiot. But
oh, it's all good.
I'll you know what, just for the fun of it, I'll go with the upset. I'll go with what I'm feeling in my heart right now. I feel like in my gut. I'm going to go with my gut. Czechia.
Nice. And then who's your gold, silver, bronze?
So gold US, silver Czechia, as I think they would like to get the revenge game, kind of like what happened in that shootout early in the tournament, but USA's too good. They're going to get gold. And I'm going to say bronze for Sweden.
Okay, fair. I mean, this could go any which way. It's short tournament here, single game elimination. Myself, I feel bad. It's the easy one, but I'm gonna go USA Sweden, both win their games. And then I think as a fun counterpoint to last year, where USA Sweden were in the bronze medal game, and I think there was like 15 plus goals in that game.
Oh,
Yeah.
it was
I think
crazy.
it's gonna be.
Yeah.
I think this one's gonna be like a lockdown defense. It's gonna be either 1-0 or it's gonna be 2-1. That's my guess for USA Sweden with Havelid and Augustine in net. It's going to be a close one, but I think the USA is probably going to eke it out. I like Augustine a lot at this point. So Sweden gets silver there. And then I'm going to go with Finland for bronze. I just think they've been improving every single game and they're finding their mojo here. And I think this is their tournament. You know, like they went against Sweden, who we thought was going to absolutely destroy them. They hadn't allowed a goal, and they
Yeah.
scored 3 times. It's just like, oh, maybe Sweden isn't invincible, and maybe
Yeah.
Finland hasn't forgotten how to play hockey all of a sudden. So I have Finland for bronze there, but anything could happen.
Yeah.
This doesn't matter. We'll find out in just 3 days, basically. I
Yeah.
can't wait. Uh, all right, thanks for that, Matt. I'm glad we could run through some predictions quick and all be really wrong publicly for fun. Um, all right, we're gonna wrap up the show as we love to do each week with our prospects of the week. And it looks like we've got a special All World Juniors edition here, which makes sense because that's the only junior hockey going on right now, basically. But Matt, I'll come to you first. Who do you got this week?
I mentioned him earlier, just in passing there, but Servac Petrovsky for Slovakia. He had a heck of a tournament, even though Slovakia didn't end up going into the medals or at all. But Minnesota Wild prospect, a guy that's maybe a little forgotten in the prospect pool when you have other guys like Ogren, like you mentioned there. He's been, yeah, Petrovsky's been really good, 5 goals. So he's my prospect of the week. You know, he's been really good in the OHL. He got half his goals at the World Junior 5 goals. He's got 10 goals in the OHL right now. I believe it's a point a game. He's got 28 points in the OHL right now. So yeah, heck of a tournament, and he'll go back to junior and maybe parlay that into some domination for the rest of the year.
Yeah, Petrovsky was really strong for Slovakia. Not really a name you might have thought of too much coming into this tournament, but really great showing. Through the first 3 games, I'd say he looked like an MVP contender for the tournament, honestly. But alas, that's pretty unlikely now. Anywho, Peter, what about you? Who's your prospect of the week here?
I am picking from Team USA, Gavin Brindley. This is where I put that little footnote from before because I really wanted to talk about him then, but I'm going to save him for now. Second round pick from the Columbus Blue Jackets in 2023. He's 5'9", but he is leading the tournament in goals with 6 right now. Yeah, I mean, we would have thought that maybe Jimmy Snuggerud, Rucker McGroarty would be in that category, but you're getting one of those depth players moving on up, and he's been a very big factor for them with his motor, his speed, his shot. Definitely providing a major impact, and I believe he's also 4th in tournament scoring as well. So he's got that going for him as well. So finding the offense very often, finding the back of the net very often. So Gavin Brindley is my prospect of the week.
Yeah, we love Gavin Brindley here. In this house, we love Gavin Brindley. Nice, that's a great one. My prospect of the week here is Jesse Pulkkinen for Finland. He was eligible for last year's draft, and watching him play, it's like, whoa, why didn't he get drafted? Well, it's because in 43 games in the top junior league out in Finland last year, he had 4 points in 43 games. And it's like, yeah, he's, better defensively than offensively, but a junior league and he's like 4 points in 43 games is not enough. However, this year he's only played 18 games in that league because he scored 28 points as a defenseman in those 18 games. And so then he's played 11 pro games since in the top 2 levels in Finland and has just been a dominant 2-way player for Finland. Again, according to Elite Prospects manual stats before today's games, he had the absolute best, like #1 in the tournament defensive results among defensemen, very high ranking among all the players offensively as well. Just excellent on both sides of the puck so far. He will be drafted this year. I promise you that. That kind of explosion offensively, I don't even know how to multiply that. What is that? He went from zero point 0.1 points per game last year to like 1.8. So what is that? 18 times more offense this year than last year, which is absurd. And some of that comes down to luck. He's a defenseman. It's not all going to be self-created, but that's too much to ignore. So he's been great at this tournament. Someone to watch in the last 2 games, but also to watch as the draft comes as an overager here. I think he's going to go middle of the draft probably, if not higher, if he keeps it up in the Liga. Anyway, that'll do it for us this week. Thank you all for tuning into another episode of Prospect Corner. Enjoy the last little bit of the World Juniors here. We have to wait another whole year for more, but it's been a lot of fun, and so I'm excited for it to keep going here. Make sure you subscribe to the Hockey Writers YouTube channel to make sure you catch all of our new episodes. And also check out our NHL Draft and Prospect Substack to stay caught up on all of our new prospects content. It is almost draft season. That is coming up very soon now. So stay tuned. There's a link in the description for that below. Thank you, Matt and Peter, as always, for joining me here. And thank you all for joining us on this week's episode of Prospect Corner. We'll see you next time.